Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report, and a subject which is of concern considerably to the citizens and the corporate and industrial sector is what could be the next set of steps that India and Pakistan might take in the event of the continuing tensions both militarily and diplomatically between the two countries, as Pakistan might just decide, put to pressure by India diplomatically, to resort to another terror attack on India. What could be its implications for Indians and India's economy? And if India thereafter responds with a full-fledged military response, how would that be viewed by the world? And we have none better than Mr. Gary Singh, the head of IRIS, as our guest today to throw more light on the various risk factors. So Gary, the first question is, and this is a question that was on everybody's mind, that in the event of push comes to shove, and should there be an escalation of tensions and possibly a short, sharp military conflict between the two countries, what is going to be the economic impact? What is going to be the view of the investors in the Indian market? Quite clearly, Pakistan is anyway a no-no for investors worldwide, but India is still very much the much sought after foreign investment destination. But how would this impact on the economy?
Sure. No, thank you for the question. And something which I like to say before I really answer the question is, if you look at any war, it is not happening on one front. There are three different fronts. First is economic war, which I believe India, Pakistan are very sharply engaged, and thankfully India is winning it handsomely. Second is a war through cyber, and which I believe is one of the means which can hit the economy and other factors as well. I think Indians are regularly calling about Pakistan and some other adversary using that war against them. And thirdly is a real war. And I think even that is going on because the low intensity conflict or the terrorism, you can call it as an ongoing war. So war is happening. It's only about till what scale it reaches. And now comes a very interesting factor, that will these two countries go for a war and what is the impact? First of all, since the globally war is also economic and a lot of other factors, let's realize the fact that India's GDP on purchase parity is $8.7 billion, third largest in the world, and 7.3% of the global GDP. So if there is war and if there is an economic impact, it's a global impact and not impact solely on India and Pakistan. So if this war happens and there is an extension, so is India going to only fight with Pakistan, or we have a China factor which is supporting Pakistan on every issue? But will China go for a war because they're exporting $60 billion goods to India and buying a lot of raw material for India, which is again being used to produce a lot of stuff for global market? Are we good enough with Russia that Russia can tell China these two boys can settle between them and you don't intervene? Will China take on additional conflict zone issues when South China Sea is already a problem for them? So it's a very complex thing. But when it comes to economy, yes, the impacts are devastating. For India more, because India is much larger and much more sought after economy globally. Well, the cost of war for India is likely to be 5,000 crore rupees per day. That can very well give any kind of insight into what war can bring.
And in the event of a conflict lasting for about a fortnight, the figures could go up to anything close to 100,000 crores or upwards. But if you look at it in comparison to the loss that India has been suffering, because as you yourself brought it out, that Pakistan has been bleeding India in its own way by 1,000 cuts and more. This is a price that at some stage Indian government may decide to pay. But again, would it escalate? I mean, that's another fear that is there in the market, that could Pakistan then push to the wall, resort to the use of so-called tactical nuclear weapons? My understanding is that for 2-3 reasons, certain things won't happen. One is tactical nuclear weapons would only be resorted to by Pakistan in the event of a big city in Pakistan falling into Indian hands like Lahore. And then also tactical nuclear weapons having a limited area of impact would impact more Pakistan's citizens in the state of Punjab than Indian army, which is trained and equipped to fight in a nuclear environment. The second is, could China intervene? as you rightly brought it out, China's stakes in India are so high, and historically, with the exception of 1962, China has never intervened in a conflict between India and Pakistan. But the third thing is that what could Pakistan do? I think that really is the big question that I want your answers to. That Pakistan could push to the wall, with General Raheel Sharif due to retire very soon, may like to have his last hurrah, and might like to do another terror attack, another Mumbai type terror attack, because that is something that would be a shake and an impactful act on the Indian economy. So if that would happen, how would it immediately pan out on the Indian economic sector?
Like you very correctly brought out, there are possibilities, and if that happens, so clearly the factor of India winning if there are three wars, India winning the economic one, Pakistan wants to bring the other two to bring India down economically. So economic impacts on India are going to be quite humongous, which will include the overall risk premium for the Indian assets going up, the insurances will go up, investment will start drying out. We are ready to build 100 smart cities. We need foreign investment and technology for it. That's going to go missing. The cost of repair after the war. Well, today, a lot of people talk about the Indian defense budget having exceeded the French budget as well, because it's constantly going up. But a careful analysis will show the Indian defense budget is regularly declining as percentage of GDP we have.
It's now 1.68%.
So it's going down in a manner, but all this can change, and our effort towards again trying to be a military nation are going to be strong. But carefully, if you look at it, India loses more because we have more, but Pakistan loses everything. Last time a cricket team visited Pakistan was Sri Lanka, and there was an attack, and after that the home series actually played in Middle East, not even in Pakistan. So that is the impact they're having, and they will love to have a similar impact on India as well. So while India loses more, but Pakistan loses everything. So economically, that's exactly the situation in front of us.
Yeah, in fact, my view is that Pakistan is really desperate, because the size of the Indian economy currently, give or take a little, is 16 times bigger than the Pakistan economy, and by 2025 it will be 20 times bigger. So therefore, Pakistan is going to be such a small element in our economic calculation that we are not even going to listen to their constant laments on Kashmir. And that is Pakistan's really big worry, that the window for Pakistan to extract mileage from India is closing. So what in the near future do you feel could be really, in crisp terms, that what could be the challenges for the Indian industry, what all they should look out for, what should the corporate sector look out for in the event of Pakistan doing what it can to attract New Delhi's attention to Pakistan's agenda?
Sure. First, let me agree to the point you mentioned about the size of economy. Now, if we go 20 years back, we had this big Cold War problem between two super nations of the world. I think they never fought a real war, but there is one country which clearly won that battle because economically they kept moving ahead, whereas the other superpower was not even left with enough money to maintain their own arsenal and own technology in defense. Similar situation which can come in between India and Pakistan as well. As of now, since war is going on, the companies have to be very carefully looking at their own risk profile. The attempt of terrorists to hit any Indian corporate company will definitely be hitting the Indian economy, which is, I will call it as a Pak nationalist agenda rather than a terrorist agenda. So if that is the reality, whether you know your risk mitigation techniques, whether you know that you are not the obvious target, whether you know that your personal and your other assets are well protected, is a very careful day-to-day scenario people need to worry about. So I think corporate need to still worry more about what can happen to them, their immediate assets and people, rather than look at too much of India-Pakistan war scenario. So they need to mitigate themselves about the everyday war which is
So in short, at the end of the day, your efforts as a corporate entity must continue to mitigate risk, to do away with the possible challenges that you could face, regardless of where India-Pakistan relations are headed. Very interesting points, Gary, but we'll be back after a break to look at several other dimensions before we come to the concluding issues related to India and Pakistan.
U.S. companies exporting goods to India or manufacturing goods in India will be impacted. But I believe the most significant concern for U.S. companies will be the potential risk to the service industry in India. Many large U.S. multinationals have a significant part of their back office and customer service operations in India. Any disruption to the India economy, their communication or transportation systems, due to a war could potentially and significantly disrupt the service industry in India and could harm U.S. company operations globally. It is more important than ever that U.S. companies, and for that matter all companies with significant operations in India, have excellent business continuity and disaster recovery plans in place. It is easy when things are going well and disasters haven't been happening for a while for disaster recovery plans and business continuity plans to take a back seat. My advice to U.S. companies today would be to dust off their disaster recovery and business continuity plans. Be sure they are up to date. Be sure that they are enhanced to contemplate the possibility and impact of a war in the region. I believe that will be money well spent. It is imperative that these plans be updated for the contingency of war and that they actually be tested to be sure that they will be effective.
Foreign direct investment is about investor confidence, growth opportunities, and investor returns, all of which is driven by economic and political stability. So talk of war spooks investors into taking a wait-and-see attitude. So we have to be careful about loose talk. As an investor and as a corporate director, I am concerned any time there is talk of hostility and instability. It increases the cost of doing business, such as increase in insurance costs or increase in the cost of capital, while stability, on the other hand, reduces such costs. World economies today are interlinked, and disruptions to global supply chains ripple throughout the world, wiping out significant value in no time at all.
Personally, I don't think so. I think China and India are two biggest countries in the world, and especially in Asia, they have huge relationships on business, on investments. And for now, China is turning from a manufacturer country to become like a consumer markets. But India has a huge potential, especially for technology side and also the manpowers. I see that in the past 2 or 3 years, there are many Chinese companies. They are moving to India, like Lenovo, like Huawei, like Xiaomi. They are very famous companies in China, and they are moving there. And I also see lots of Indian businessmen. They are traveling in China, especially in Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen and Guangzhou. So I don't think that China will have that issues politically to disturb the business development with India. Especially like when we talk about the risks, we have to consider like different risks, like political risk, economic risk. But for the countries like China and India, we don't think that China will sacrifice a lot of issues, political issues, to stop the business relationship with India. So in my opinion, I believe that there will be more business opportunities between these two countries, and especially for the part of like the technology side.
Welcome back. We are continuing to look at the ongoing tension between India and Pakistan and its implications primarily for the Indian economy and more specifically for the corporate and industrial sector and their employees. Gary, if this tension between India and Pakistan continues, and as many international observers are looking very carefully at these two neighbors which have in the past gone to war, and Pakistan has been making warlike noises, how does the Indian industry and the corporate sector reassure the international community that India is still a great investment destination, Pakistan's terror attacks, threats notwithstanding?
Well, that's a very relevant question. Obviously, the measures have to be taken at government level, industry level, and in all stages. Number one, we need to carefully look at that how war will impact. if the war takes place, I agree certain areas which are close to border where the conflict zones really lie, the industries can get impacted there. But if you really look at it, how many industries really are placed in those locations? So that is one. Number two, India is a very vast country. The geographical spread of India is so high.
Yeah.
Something that's happening, let's say in Kashmir right now, I'm very sure the noise doesn't reach us till Bangalore and Kerala at all. So even if a war takes place, it's not easy for Pakistan to bring complete India at war. Their capability to go inside the airspace and dig deep into Indian territory and try to hit is not huge. So India should make it very clear that India has capability to fight war, which is war for Pakistan and a limited area conflict for India.
No, in fact, interestingly, it is a point that Chairman Mao made several decades ago when China was being threatened by various countries about the possibility of a nuclear conflict. He says we can go to a nuclear conflict, but at the end of the day, there will be still Chinese left in the world to rule over the dead. The same argument could apply between India and Pakistan, that even if Pakistan decides to go for a nuclear conflict and Pakistan's entire missile arsenal cannot target every Indian city, most of them are still out of the reach, particularly in southern and eastern India. But the most important thing is, I think, every study that has been seriously carried out and wargaming that has been done has shown that Pakistan is unlikely to use nuclear weapons, and the threats that often come are from uneducated civilian politicians who like to brandish the nuclear weapon because it's become an article of faith for Pakistan. It's a kind of equalizer for them. But more importantly, I would like to ask you that in terms of India's growing spread in the global trade market, there is obviously just a pittance involved in terms of what it is directed at Pakistan or the trade with Pakistan. And Pakistan's trade with India is less than $500 million. So really, at the end of the day, how else can we put pressure on Pakistan economically to fall in line, bilateral trade apart?
Sure, I think there are two clear-cut things we need to look at. Globally, all the business doesn't happen from government to government. There are a lot of private players who do business. So any private player, or even government for that matter, when they're looking at financial things, first thing they look for is security of investment, that it doesn't go and just evaporates. Number two is the higher amount of returns. So India should carefully ensure, and government can give certain assurances saying, we'll ensure that your investment doesn't evaporate. And when it comes to high rate of return, if you really look at it, the US economy has been seeing a struggle phase. European economy, which was also struggling after Brexit, is going to see another situation. China, in fact, has been slowing down. So India really looks like one of the best destinations.
It is now. Fact, it is regarded by global indexes as the best destination for foreign investment.
Right. So in fact, I'll be more than keen to ask you, since you know the strategy of these multiple countries we're looking at, what will be their response? And does India stand to win them diplomatically, even when fighting a war, so that these countries continue to support India?
I think, there has been they are waiting and watching in the wings to see how India actually responds to the situation, in as much as there was no criticism, barring aside from Pakistan, and some hushed criticism from their good all-weather ally, the Chinese, about the surgical strikes. Because at the end of the day, I think many countries were quite gladdened to see that finally India came into its own and was able to mete out punishment to Pakistan. But equally important, I think it's important for India to send very clear signals to the international community and say that, see, as far as business and investment in India is concerned, these are our terms of reference and these are our red lines. As far as what we do with Pakistan, again, these are our terms of reference and these are our red lines. But I want to go back to you, Gary, and this is, I think, the most important part of this program that you are best placed to educate us all about, that the corporate sector, it needs to protect itself. You cannot get away by saying, I've paid my taxes, so the government should provide me protection. Because the biggest threat from Pakistan is not the nuclear threat, it's about the unseen terrorist who is lurking in the corners, in the shadows to hit out. and upset the Indian economic agenda. So how does the corporate sector protect itself? How does it protect its employees? The loss in human resource can be humongous. And most important is the government takes taxes from the citizens, but the government uses that money to protect itself. It doesn't protect Bangalore, it doesn't protect Mumbai. So things are still left lot to be desired. So what are your views on those issues?
I think I have a very strong message for the government and as well as corporate, but both the messages are a little different. So to the government, I will say, please look at business happening in the country as critical for country, its economy and citizens. So when you are making your defense plans, when you're making protection plans for your critical installations, they are not only your military, government, nuclear and other installation, they are as much as Bangalore, which is actually IT capital of the world. If Bangalore gets hit, it's not only India, the complete global economy and global companies get hit. So even those critical business destinations and industries are as much critical. So we need to protect them. Even you saying, yes, we'll protect them, start making plans and implementing them will give huge reassurance to every corporate, whether Indian or global in nature. So that is something which is a must. I don't think government should look at it as a choice. It is a must. They need to do that. Message for corporate, in case you're looking at any kind of situation coming up, something which is not replaceable is your manpower. You can look at new technology, alternate sites, new office buildings, but if you lose manpower, that is something you cannot replace. So your business continuity plans and everything else need to be brushed up well, that your human resource is well protected. They know what to do in a situation like that, so that you're able to utilize the same human resource equally well, even at the time of a local conflict, terrorist attack or a large-scale war.
Yeah. Quite clearly, Gary, you've really touched on the nerve of the issue, and that is really how the corporate sector and the industrial sector must prepare for the ongoing tension between India and Pakistan's nefarious designs. Now, the big question, and that's what I leave the audience with this question at the end of the show, have you made your plans? Have your contingencies been prepared? And are you willing to make long-term investments to ensure that your business and your agenda is safeguarded? Government of India willing to provide protection or not? On that big question, I'll end the show. Thank you very much for being with us. We'll be back next week with another episode. Goodbye.